And I just wanted to check if that was commonly done, because we're in the pre-study stage right now, not even in the study stage of C-10. I didn't want to send mine in yet, but I didn't want to be seen as not cooperating. And secondly, having amendments sent in before we even hear from witnesses, in my opinion, hearing these witnesses tell us about their concerns and recommendations, in my view, is premature. So I was wondering if there's some reason why we're being asked to send our recommendations for amendments in so quickly. Because I think it might be preferable for us to take the time to listen from different testimonies from various organizations before we put our amendments together and present them to you.
Before I get to the next question, I had two different issues that I just heard from. I thought perhaps Mr. Reyes would weigh in on what Mr. Brusen said. Mr. Brusen, I apologize. I don't know if you're looking for an answer on that. Do you want to leave it at that at your statement? Okay, very well, and done. Mr. Reyes.
Sorry,
Mr.
not
Brusen.
done. Sorry, Mr. Chair. I was hoping that the clerk would be able to provide that clarification as to whether the information had been shared with all of the members.
Oh, can I return to that? During the deliberations, I will give you that answer, perhaps in between witnesses, if that's okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Reyes, your point. To tell you the truth, the issue was brought to my attention about the issue of providing possible amendments. You are absolutely right in the sense that your amendments could be affected by testimony that not only you hear here, but if the bill arrives to us and succeeds second reading, then you could also be in that same position. The reason why we brought this forward was because we wanted to avoid a logjam, as it were. We wanted to avoid a backlog of amendments that come in because we know, I suspect, that there may be a lot of amendments. I took this upon myself because I'd like to be in a position where I remind members about the...
There seems to be a confusion between...
Dr. Geist, I've looked through your 20-part series. You've been the most controversial person, if you don't mind me saying, in the country towards the broadcasting bill, C-10. You talked about it for 5 minutes. We could probably hear from you for an hour. But you spent a month dissecting this bill. You feel it is deeply flawed. You gave us some reasons why. But it's going to have a major impact if it is passed through the House of Commons, and I'd like you to comment on that.
Sure. Thanks for reading, and thanks for the question. I tried to highlight a few of the things, and I think the impact will be felt across a number of different kinds of stakeholders. From a consumer perspective, as I noted, what this is going to do is going to decrease choice and raise costs. There will be services that will not enter the Canadian market. This will particularly hit multicultural communities in Canada that often rely upon different services from other countries that stream in. Many of them, they look at the associated regulated costs and say they're simply not interested in entering into the marketplace. Less choice, higher cost for consumers at a difficult time. From a broadcaster perspective, I think it actually puts many of them in a disadvantage as well. They're going to have to compete with some of the large companies like Netflix and Amazon for Canadian content. They're going to get outbid, and they're going to be left with intellectual property that isn't the very best, because that's going to be scooped up by some of their American counterparts, and they're going to find themselves in a difficult position because streaming services, even Canadian streaming services, will be able to get foreign capital. They'll still be restricted and not have access to the same kind of capital. And from a creator perspective, I want to emphasize again, this is going to take years. Anyone who's done anything at the CRTC knows that we're talking about lengthy hearings, followed by judicial review, followed by the prospect of more hearings. It will take at least half a decade to get this sorted out. And so from a creator perspective, there aren't a whole lot of gains to be had, certainly not in the short term. And it's somewhat ironic, given that the sector, at least pre-COVID, was enjoying robust financing, and in fact was record-setting amounts of film and TV production in Canada.
I agree with you there. The minister and the Liberals have talked about comparing this to what they do in France, what they do in the UK, what they're trying to do in Australia. You feel that's misleading in this bill, and why do you feel that?
It is, because it simply isn't what's happening. The reference point is often to the European Audiovisual Directive, but we should be clear. There are only 4 member states, Denmark, Germany, Sweden, and the UK, that have currently transposed the directive. That means there are more than 20 member states that haven't even moved forward with it. And if we take a look at the kind of obligations even the countries that have implemented this have done, they're far different from what is being proposed here. Denmark, for example, has a 2% direct investment requirement. It's a far cry from the 30% that the minister has been thinking about, and there is no content quota at all in Denmark. In Germany, the levy runs between 1.8 and 2.2%. Spain is thinking about a 5% requirement. Plus, the dollars are just dramatically different compared to what the government is thinking about when it has its $1 billion that it talks about in terms of new gains compared to what is being imposed in Europe. And it's an inapt comparison more broadly because the requirements apply across the EU. We're a single small market. And so if you've got an obligation that can be spread, let's say 1% across nearly 30 member states, that is very different from the same 30% on one country with 37, 38 million people.
We don't feel the 835 million that the minister claims will be the windfall in this from streaming providers. We don't share the enthusiasm with the minister on this because there is no accountability with the 835 million. We've asked for the information now. We've heard that it's coming. But at the same time, when we talk to companies like Disney and Netflix and Amazon and Apple,
Point of order.
they don't see this at all, Mr.
Point of yes, Ms. de Bruzen, please.
Just as a point of clarification, not that it's forthcoming, the point that was raised is that it has actually, in fact, already been shared months ago.
Okay, thank you, Ms. de Bruzen. So I'll leave that at that. Mr. Waugh, back to you.
Yeah, so the 835 million that they claim will be the windfall from these streaming companies, and the concern here is, where does it go? And we can't find out, other than we've heard that they have brought it forward now, but they're not shared when you talk to Netflix, Amazon, Apple, and so on. They do not share the robust 835 million that they may be in charge of in bringing extra money to Canada.
Yeah, let me just run with a couple of things. One, it's great that that information was provided to the committee months ago. It would be even greater if the Canadian public had access to that information. And that the fact that so much of this data has not been provided about the implementation, about even some of the analysis to the broader public, I think has been problematic with all respect. In terms of the money, a lot of it is not even new money. These companies are already investing hundreds of millions of dollars in Canada. We know that because we've seen increased spending in film and TV production in Canada in recent years. Much of that is coming from foreign-based services. And so what we know will happen is in the short term, many of them may cut back because of the uncertainty as to whether or not it will count for the purposes of these new requirements. Once they then figure it out, it's just going to be shifting dollars from one pot to another. The idea that this brings in all this new revenue simply isn't the case. And in fact, we run the risk as well of certain services that might otherwise come into the market and invest, saying that the Canadian market isn't worth the hassle. That's less money for creators and, of course, higher cost and less choice for consumers.
Well, I mean, there seems to be a confusion between... Well, I mean,